So you know how when you've got a really cool painting and you're mixing the colors and they look flat and they don't look colorful and they look faded? Well, I've got two things that will help. Now, to illustrate these two things, I'm going to open up Photoshop because I think Photoshop does a great job of helping visualize what's going on. So to start off, I'm going to imagine that I'm painting this portrait of this girl, and I'm going to look at the colors on the side of her face, on the left side of her face in the shadows, and try and come up with a good color that matches. And so as I analyze this, I think, okay, this is probably pretty close. It's on the cooler, more purple side. And I'll look back and forth. That looks pretty close. But the interesting thing that happens is I'm going to paint the same exact color on this side. Now it's way lighter than what I thought. And if you go back and forth between these two colors, they look like totally different colors. On the light background, this looks much darker and this looks much lighter. And so colors can definitely play tricks on our eyes. So I'd say the first thing that I'd say is make sure you do an underpainting to get those values and to get those colors close so that when you go over the top, you're not having these illusions and these tricks being played on your eyes. So the second thing I want to illustrate here is when you're trying to come up with the right color, rather than thinking of colors as just a color, try and break it down into three separate things. And in Photoshop, they do it conveniently here. You've got hue, saturation, and lightness or value. So the lightness is how dark and how light colors are. Saturation is how gray saturated the colors are, so really saturated or more on the gray side. And then the hue is of course the color itself, so the values of color. So when I'm analyzing a color, I think about these three things. I think about the value, the lightness and the darkness. I think about the saturation, and I think about the hue. And with the hue, you can kind of think of a subcategory as warm and cold. How warm is the color? How cold is the color? So with that, there is also a hierarchy of importance, I think, here. And to show this, I'm going to select, just get some random selection here. Okay, so we're selecting part of her face. We're going to do a test here, like what makes the biggest difference and what's most important. So with saturation, let's add some saturation here, and you can see that there's a difference there. So it doesn't look too bad, but you can tell that there's an effect with saturation. Okay, so now let's look at the hue and the color. So if we change the color, the selection, make it more yellow, make it more purple, and if I select that, the actual color, changing that doesn't look too bad. If I'm way off on that, on the hue, it has a difference, but it's not as important. So take a look here if I change the value. So as I change the value, there's a drastic difference, and it starts to really look pretty crazy. And you can see it just starts looking really awful. And so what I like to do is focus on value first. Make sure that the value is right. How dark it is, how light it is. Make sure those are exactly where they need to be. And secondary, and also important, the hue and the saturation. And all together they make the color what it needs to be. And again, all three are important, but value has the biggest impact on the color. Hopefully that helps a little bit, and let me know what you think, and thanks for watching.